And thanks for joining us on ABC24 This Week. I'm ABC24 content manager Brad Broders, filling in this week for host Richard Ransom. We're here every week to get the real story behind the big stories. Plenty to get to. Here's the topics we will tackle today. Who is eligible to run as Memphis mayor? The residency debate took on a new turn this week when two candidates challenged a recent legal opinion that anyone who didn't live in city limits in the past 5 years cannot run this year for the job. Also, Tennessee lawmakers appear open to tweaking the state's third-grade retention law and giving more leeway to get more kids to the fourth grade if they don't make the grade on the state's TCAP reading test. We'll explain. And the NBA lays out a suspension for Memphis Grizzlies guard John Morant. Was it the right move? And let me introduce you to our panel. Joining me to our right is ABC24 political analyst Otis Sanford, as well as Reverend Kenneth Whalum, who is also a former Memphis City School Board member. We begin tonight with the Memphis mayoral race that's heading this October and a week with major legal developments. This week, two mayoral candidates, current Shelby County Sheriff Floyd and former Shelby County Commissioner Van Turner, filed separate lawsuits against the Shelby County Election Commission. The suits challenge a recent clarification opinion by former Shelby County Election Commissioner Robert Myers. He cited the residency ruling in place since 1905, which requires any Memphis mayoral candidate to live in Memphis for at least 5 years. Bonner recently moved to Bartlett to a home in East Memphis. Van Turner recently moved from Southeast Shelby County to Binghamton. Well, Otis, we'll start with you. What's your reaction and how do you expect this kind of shakes up the race right now?
Well, I'm certainly not surprised that they would go to court on this. This is very important for every candidate involved. So I'm not surprised to see first Floyd Bonner and then later in the week Van Turner file complaints, lawsuits in Chancery Court to clarify. What we have here are dueling opinions here. Alan Wade, who's a longtime city council lawyer and has represented the city on a lot of different things. He said emphatically that the residency rule no longer exists for several different reasons. There's a 1996 referendum vote that city voters did. Or maybe there was a Supreme Court decision that nullified the 5-year rule. So he's saying that, but the Election Commission asked for a second opinion. And that was turned over to Robert Myers, and he gave a totally opposite opinion. The Election Commission decided to go with Robert Myers' opinion. I don't know why we needed a second opinion, but we do. It has to be decided by the courts, and it will be a significant ruling. It could totally change the face of the election.
Yeah, and notice to your point, in that February legal opinion, Robert Myers cited Memphians passing referendum in 1966 and 1995 to uphold the residency requirement, and he said, according to his belief, that if it's challenged again, it would be found constitutional. Reverend Whalum, how do you think that will shake out potentially in court based on that opinion?
Well, it's hard to say how it would shake out in court. I think it would depend on who the chancellor is, who's the judge, who's making the ruling. However, I do think we needed a second opinion because the first one didn't make good sense. My grandmama said it didn't make right good sense. If you want to be the mayor of a city, then at the very least, you ought to have demonstrated that you lived in that city. I think it's just common sense. It stands to reason that a person who wants to be mayor of my city would live in my city. I hope that it goes a long way. In fact, I hope that the original rulings in Chancery Court, I hope it goes against Van and Floyd and that they appeal it, which they should do, which I would do, to a higher court here in Tennessee so that this controversy can keep boiling and more people start paying attention, and then common sense kicks in and people say, well, why are you suing when you don't even live in my city? Now that's a political piece that I think can be effective.
And Otis, we'll get to a new poll that came out this week in just a second, but if, let's say hypothetically, a judge says, Bonner and Turner, you can't run, how does this change the dynamics of the race?
It totally upends the race because we have three of the most well-known and at this point, leading candidates, however you define leading. They are the three candidates who are at risk of not even being allowed to vote. So it totally upends this election. It will bring more people into the race. Ken makes a very good political point, and it's a political point, that voters probably should say, well, if you haven't lived in the city of Memphis, how do you expect to be the mayor of the city of Memphis? That's a political decision. The decision that a chancellor would make, and maybe even an appellate court, and I hope they do all of this expeditiously, because we can't be waiting around forever. I don't think they're going to rely on the politicalness of this. I think they're going to look at what the law says, what did the voters do in the past, and make a decision based on that, and not on whether somebody believes that if you haven't lived in the city 5 years, you don't deserve to be the mayor.
Well, I think it stands to reason that the other candidates, the less well-known candidates, I think they probably hope that it does go deeper and go longer, because it gives them, even if the ultimate ruling judicially is that Floyd and Van and Willie and everybody else can run, the candidates who are on the outside of that can make hay with this particular political issue. And it is political issues that cause people to vote or not vote.
Oh, I agree. And they, if they were smart, they should be hammering this every day. Michelle McKissick did. She put out a statement saying, hey, look, I've been living here all my life. He's going under the radar. You know, look at me. So, you're right about that.
But, gentlemen, what's the timeline on this? I mean, there could be an appeal. The filing deadline's in July. I mean, what kind of calendar do we kind of see out on the horizon of when this could be decided?
Well, I certainly would hope that the chancellor makes an expeditious decision here, especially if whether he's going to grant a temporary restraining order or a temporary injunction. That decision, he or she has to make that decision quickly, because whoever loses might go to an appellate court. That has to be done quickly. You know, but elections are important here, and I really would hope that they don't drag this out.
Well, I hope they do drag it out for a couple of reasons. Well, because Floyd
Make for good news stories.
Well, absolutely. And Floyd and Van are really caught between a rock and a hard place, because if they allow a negative ruling to just sit there and then they decide, well, we're not going to run, which I don't see that happening, then they're lost. But if they decide, well, wait a minute, we deserve our day in court. Let me prove how not living in Memphis for the last 5 years makes me the best candidate. I think that's a great and free PR for the other candidates.
You're right about that.
Well, on top of these two major filings this week, also this week, a new unaffiliated poll by Case of Polling showed out of 1,000 likely Memphis voters who participated, a tight race so far, with Van Turner, you see there on your screen, at 17%. Former Memphis Mayor Willie Harrington, who could also be potentially ruled to not be eligible to run, he's at 15%, and then the aforementioned Sheriff Floyd Bonner at 15%. So we're talking in this, granted it's one poll, it's early, however, the three candidates who might be ruled not eligible are leading right now. Otis, you've covered politics a long time. I mean, this is crazy.
Well, it is, but it isn't. You know, polling is just a snapshot in time. You know, you can give whatever credibility you want to give to this poll. I think it's significant in terms of just letting people know where candidates stand right now. And I'm not surprised to see Van Turner, Floyd Bonner, and Willie Harrington near the top. That just makes this whole issue around this court case that much more important, because the three top people, according to this poll, may not be eligible to run. I give it some credence.
I give it absolutely no credence, zero credence. I said on my Twitter page earlier last week that Brian Stevens ought to be ashamed of himself for putting it out there. Now, he's a smart guy. I have nothing against him. The issues that he asked, the questions he asked, and the way he framed the poll, that's wise. That's a good thing to do, because it tends to give it credibility with the people you're polling. However, all this poll amounts to at this point is a name recognition contest. That's all this is, man. How in the world could Van Turner be more well-known than Willie Harrington? Come on, y'all. Come on.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's not all about being more well-known. It's about favorability. It's about experience level. What have you done recently? And I think Turner has some credibility to talk about that. Again, Brian Stevens says he's not working for any of the candidates. You know, that's what he said. So I do give it a little bit of credence.
And that poll did show 21% of those participants were undecided. Right. But Otis, you've covered politics for a long time. I mean, we're dealing with some serious, heavy issues right now. Police reform, Tyree Nichols' aftermath. How important is this race? I mean, Mayor Strickland can't run again. There's uncertainty, but whoever's eligible, how critical of a race is this?
I've said it before, and I've said it on this show. This is the most consequential mayoral election, certainly since 1991. when Dr. Harrington was elected as the first African-American mayor. But when you talk about the first election, regular election, without an incumbent in the race, you have to go all the way back to 1971.
Long time.
And that is a tremendously long time. And it shows just how important this is. We're talking about Memphis's future here. Yeah. And so they have to make rational decisions about who needs to lead Memphis into the future.
Well,
very seriously here, I think that it's a good thing that this issue has come up. I think it's a good thing that 2 Chancery Court filings have been made, because maybe after they have to fight this out and really prove that they desire and deserve to be elected mayor, maybe we can get down to the real issues, which I don't think the real issue is crime. I think crime is a symptom of our real issue here. I think public education is the main issue in Memphis, and maybe the mayor's race can get down to a discussion and a real fight about how to best address that issue.
Yeah,
all right.
But the public thinks crime is the #1 issue. Education is right up there, but the voters and the public, I believe, will tell you crime is #1.
And that's why I think that if the candidates have to put skin in the game and make it be clear that they deserve to be elected mayor, I think a good mayoral candidate will lead the public to understand that crime is a symptom and not the cause.
All right, well, we could talk about this for hours, but unfortunately we're out of time for this break. But after the break, we'll dive into possible changes Tennessee lawmakers are considering with the state's 3rd grade retention law now in effect before next month's TCAP reading test. You're watching ABC 24 This Week.